that everyone's continued to support our annual walk talks. And today we were just saying, Peter was telling us this is a for-use day for this building because we had Sunday school, church, this event, and then the maypole dancers come in tonight. So anyone who wants to stick around for maypole dancing, that's happening tonight. Well, our talk in a moment here, given by my mom, is about Christian Metz. And Mom has continued to translate testimonies from Christian Metz and has been thinking about him this winter and put together this talk. Today we won't be hearing from Lothar Bayer, who was here last week, but anybody who's interested in that project, please just give him a call or check the Amana Heritage Society website and the Ackley website, where some of those pictures, we're going to have a link so that you can look at your house or houses in your neighborhood. So here's Mom, and I don't know, how many years have you been translating, Mom?
Well, it'll be 50.
50.
Oh my God.
50 years. So we'll go back to the
I
beginning
think
here.
in 1975, my brother asked me to do a report on the early history, and I, at that point, really didn't know that much about it. So yes, I've learned through the years. My one hang up today will be my glasses. Well, that's not the only one, but it'll be part of the thing because I have to figure out which one I can.
Is it bright? Is it light enough up there, or should I?
Well, no, the worst part is I can't sometimes see my thing and look up, you know. Now I'm wearing my regular glasses. I'll wear my computer glasses. Anyway, I had it all written down in this book, and then the other night, well, actually in the morning, I woke up early, and I thought, no, I'm not getting up. I'll go back to sleep. And so I went back to bed, but just got to thinking. And so I got this new insight into Christian Metz, and I'll just tell you about it off the cuff. I asked myself, what was so special about him? Why did the Lord choose him to speak through? To me, after all these years, he has seemed to be a rather ordinary man. He was a carpenter, a builder, but we have no record of him being a particularly spectacular woodworker. He lived simply. He didn't need too much extra. He was content to live in a sort of a woodshed while they were building Ebenezer. He just was grateful for the fact that he had a place all by himself, rather than because there were so few houses ready for occupancy. So when they had part of a woodshed ready, he was in it. And he was somewhat of a loner, but was born in a family of several siblings, and he had a large group of diverse people from all over Germany and Switzerland that he brought to the New World. So he was very seldom alone, but and with the help of his sisters, he raised a daughter. And if you need further info on that, you will have to wait for the next book. But he must have been a very teachable man, a man that I now think of as brilliant. While miraculously and astoundingly, the Lord gave Christian Metz the ideas and spoke through him, Brother Christian must still have been able to do that through his own words, and with the help of the Lord, phrasing and transmitting the Lord's plan. That's how he did it. John Bendorf, who along with Lanny does so much work for our church in clarifying our history and the contents of our amazing archive. John and I have spoken about this several times, and he agrees that Brother Christian's vocabulary is very different from the earlier Werkzeichen. Now, you would think if you're translating German, you're translating German. But considering this, they're 100 years apart. The language, just like English changes in 100 years, so did German. And so the other day I was doing a testimony by Christian Metz, and I came to an impasse. I just couldn't go any further. I understood it, but I couldn't get it into the right context in English. And so I thought, well, what don't I understand about this? And what it was there were so many words in about half a page. All of his testimonies and everything are in books like this. So about half a page, there were 20 words that I wrote down and ended up looking up in the dictionary because while I knew generally what they were, I wanted to know a different interpretation of them. So wrote them all down, found them, wrote them all down, went back to the paragraph that I couldn't get, and was able then to figure it out. And so that just gives you an idea of how his vocabulary is different. And he's not beyond making up words. One word in that particular paragraph, I mean, I could read it and I knew what he meant, but I looked it up in several dictionaries and it was not there. So, I mean, it's kind of a revealing thing, I think, about him. Anyway, now I'm to my written thing, which my title was Considering Christian Metz 2025. The leadership of Christian Metz in our community, originally known as the Community of True Inspiration, is well documented. We could probably track him from age 20 to his death when he was in 1867. We could probably track him and we'd know what he did every day, who he was with, what he thought, and sometimes even a hymn that he wrote. We have it all down. Our archive is immense. I showed you this book. This is Psalm 20. This is one of a set of 50 books where all of his testimonies are printed. And Lanny gave a great talk about our printed word last year, and that was good to know. But anyway, where was I going with this?
We've tracked him.
Huh?
We've tracked him. We know what he's up to.
Yes, and in the beginning, that's right. In the beginning of each testimony is an introduction. And if you read that introduction, first of all, you know the date when the testimony was presented, but secondly, you know where it was presented, and usually also gives you information under what circumstances it was presented. And so you have all of that, so you could write a whole biography on him just from those things. So anyway, we could learn much of what he thought by those introductions and everything. And my generation failed to do that. I sometimes think we lived in a time when people were still so preoccupied with having moved to the United States, having to convert all their thinking to the English language, having to function in the new world. They did not necessarily, at least not at my time, teach us too much about the history. I grew up not really knowing at all about Ursula Meyer. I didn't even know she existed. Christian Metz was somebody that they read testimonies of or from, and I don't know, I just felt, I'm thinking that a lot of you in this room maybe and elsewhere had that same experience. And besides that, the Second World War changed a lot of things in Amana. Because first of all, we were not encouraged to speak German, much less read it. I mean, they could read the Bible in German and sing German songs, but they could not speak the commentary in German. So they didn't even have a commentary during the Second World War, lots of times. So that was when we went to Cedar Rapids as children, the last thing your mother would do would remind you, don't speak German, when we're having lunch or when we're in the presence of other people, because it was frowned upon. And that's just, and the Second World War, after all, for my generation, I think that was still to this day, the most changeable thing in our whole life was the Second World War. It just changed everything. Okay. Now we don't have that anymore, and the only thing that stops us from reading our history is the inability to read German, and that's where I have tried to come in. I've tried for the last 50 years to put more of our history into English so that we can more readily understand and share it. During the first years of translating our history, I more or less concentrated on the earlier age of our community, the 1700s. So I cover Rock mostly and Gruber to the lesser extent. And, but that was, I never really was able to tackle Christian Metz earlier on because I felt I did not understand him. The others were in the past and they were easier for me to get a handle on, whereas Christian Metz's influence was still very relevant today. And it was just harder to think that to think of him as as a figure of leadership. During my childhood, there were probably a few who remembered Brother Christian himself, or at least remembered what someone had said about him. Now in 2025, we are long past hearing personal recollections, but because we have all the histories, the diaries, the hymns, we are certainly well equipped to learn about him, probably more than we can grasp. So to realize his importance, I believe that we are obliged to try, and that's what we'll do here this afternoon. It was probably good that I didn't concentrate my efforts on Metz's life any earlier, because it has taken me this long to reach even a small understanding about all that he achieved. Let's start with some facts about his background. He was born, as Emily has up here, in Neuwied am Rhein in Prussia, and it's north of the Ronenberg, about 60 miles or so. And his grandfather still lived at the Ronenberg in 1817 when the reawakening occurred. So they moved, Christian Metz, his family, and moved to the Ronenberg when he was 7. So he lived a lot of his life there. 6 brothers, I forgot it was that many.
Brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Really? Okay. Okay, let's start with some facts about his background. That's that now. As a young man working at and living in that old fortress, he noticed a chest with some old books, and he became interested. They were the books containing our community's early history, way before these Sammlung books we had. There were bunches of books, and they left him there from the 1700s, and he read them. He, along with several other young people, read these books and studied the tenets of our faith and their scriptural foundation. He found that the biblical foundation of our faith had great relevance in the present time. And the young group started a prayer assembly in that old castle. And then Krauser came and started what is known as the reawakening. Now, in this day and age, as we read about the leaders of our earlier history, the testimonies they presented, and the lives they led, we recognize that Christian Metz was the embodiment of all that our community of faith represented. He had the energy and endurance of Johann Friedrich Rock, who traveled back and forth to Switzerland I don't know how many times, and just seemed to keep on going when, just like the bunny that's on television. And he had the biblical knowledge and organizational ability of Eberhard Ludwig Gruber, the clarity and magnificence of Johann Adam Gruber, who I think young Gruber's testimonies are perhaps the most, forceful because he speaks, I mean, he's got all kinds of hallelujahs and praise the Lord's in there and everything, and he's just very, very dynamic. And Christian Metz has that, not in all testimonies, but in some he really shows that side of himself. And all one really needs, and he has the love and passion of Ursula Meyer, I thought, because without her in this day and age, we have so many translated by Ursula Meyer that I think she's become a great favorite of a lot of Amana church members. In his early 20s, Christian Metz became inspired by the Lord. Through his inspirations, the assembling, convincing, and conversion of a great number and variety of people to follow the Lord, Christian Metz was thrust into the role of leadership. I don't think he really ever sought it. Yes, while the Lord was the divine leader, Christian Metz, as the Lord's instrument here on earth, became the accepted leader of his many followers on their pathway toward eventual salvation. The people's trust and Christian Metz's trustworthiness became the foundation of the community of true inspiration of the 1817 reawakening. Upon accepting the fact that we more readily understand the events that brought the community into the 21st century, if we accept the fact that he was the leader and the foundation. A long list of Christian Metz's accomplishment allows us to fully comprehend his achievement, from reconnecting the old and far-flung congregations in the Germany and Switzerland of Rock's time to convincing his current followers to relocate in a more closely united group in central Germany, to bringing a relatively large number of members to the United States, where he founded Ebenezer and then Amana. Brother Christian displayed unequaled leadership ability. And I also thought, while I earlier called him just an ordinary man, I ended up, after I thought about it, he wasn't an ordinary, he was extraordinary. And I think we have to realize that. Evidenced by the very minor as well as the major events of the community's history, Brother Metz's relevance is apparent. Through the Lord's testimonies, when he presented, Brother Christian answered questions and resolved the community's problems, small or large. Somehow, before even he knew what would happen next, he was able to foresee every need. Called upon to mediate, persuade, and proceed, he faced and met every complication. While we try to determine what might have been his most difficult years, we come to a halt, realizing that each and every year, as the leader of such a multifaceted group, would have been extremely difficult. When it comes to uprooting hundreds of people from their homes and their country, to finding a way to bring them all to a new country, buy land, build homes, and create employment, as well as feed them, both physically and spiritually, the magnitude of the undertaking becomes clear. All this, and so very much more, is what Christian Metz not only undertook, but achieved. No matter how it may have weighed on his own mind, which it most certainly did. Anybody that reads his Tagebuch realizes that he was often very, very depressed about things and very worried. He was compelled to present a trusting, confident, and encouraging answer at all times. Thankfully, because he directed his own questions to the Lord, he was given the appropriate advice. Living as we do in a democratic country where freedom of speech and religion is a civil right, we cannot even imagine what it must have been like at that time in Europe. Every country, sometimes every region was ruled by a different set of rules. If a count or a prince of an area believed one way, then the entire population of that area would have to agree with him in order to avoid persecution. Now I wrote something in here. What does this say? As we again, oh yeah, and we learned part that last week from Lanny with the oath-taking part, because that was certainly a huge part of it. For instance, before they all came to the USA pre-1842, because of different religious beliefs, the inspirationists were kept from finding work. They were forced, this was while they were still in Germany, they were forced to send their children to school to be educated by teachers appointed by the local religious hierarchy. And that could vary. If the prince of that principality was Lutheran, it was the Lutheran church, or in other places, the Catholic. And they were unfairly taxed and judged. As we now know, the Prince of Isenburg, the nobleman who ruled the larger Ronneberg area, was much more lenient than most. He had an empty castle, much land to be taken care of, and after the Napoleonic Wars, a dwindling population. So he allowed our people to rent several large estates, mostly because of our forefathers' ability and willingness to work hard. They prepared all the property they rented. They repaired all the property they rented, and that was one of the hardships when they left. They invested so much money in those estates to bring them to the place where they could be lived in comfortably, that now that money was not retrievable, that was gone. And so that was really hard. They built woolen mills, they rerouted streams to provide power, and they improved the tillable land. So they were welcome tenants, but they were, it was not that easy to leave. Still, the other residents of the area were not pleased to have them around. They claimed that these pietists took jobs away and did not comply with their rules. So persecution existed. And above all, the inspirationists still had the laws of the ministry of Darmstadt. That was the ministry that controlled the Ronneberg area to contend with. And those laws did not favor them. All these things had to be dealt with. And it was Christian Metz who was called upon to answer. When the great variety of hindrances became impossible to live with, Metz was inspired to move the entire group to America. In Metz's writing is a description of his reaction to the proclamation and his grave concerns after receiving the testimony in which the Lord tells them to leave their homeland. In his Historische Beschreibung, which makes up about the end third of this book, and I have translated it. It's his personal diary of the first of that 1817 to maybe 1840 period of his life, and it'll be in the book that I talked about last year, the 1833 book. So it's going to be in there. Okay, now let's see. Oh yeah, in Metz's own words, this is what he says. In this anxious state, when he had been told to move the group to America through inspiration, when the Lord was unmoved by our pleas, I lay before him one day. All of a sudden, it was as if a brilliant ray of light was penetrating me. This ray of light presented God's intentions as a reality, a decision. And though testimonies giving indication of this had been issued at Lieblos and at Engelthal shortly before, I did not recognize them as such, or was unable to do so, because this so momentous matter had not yet been born within me. And then I thought that could happen to anybody, not the inspiration part, But so often we know somebody tells us what to do, but until you yourself understand what there is to do, which he now did, it's sometimes quite difficult. Here now the Lord was revealing a way which seemed impossible to my flesh and nature, a way which the Lord presented to me and to the community in a testimony. It was now his holy will to lead the entire community, heretofore scattered in various locations, a great distance away. My heart trembled when considering such an extraordinary upheaval of all the congregations and their accommodations, which had cost us all so much effort and money. All that everyone had was invested in this community, which was now just so barely begun. Just put yourself in his place. Christian Metz had to convince everybody that they were leaving and going to America. Despite the fact that he had doubts about it all, he had to rise above that and serve the Lord in the best possible way. The Hanach and the large former monastery, the Arnsberg, which they renamed Armenberg, had recently been leased. I mean, they didn't have the Armenberg very long at all. And all of a sudden they were asked to leave it. So it was hard. There was work to be done, and it was not quick or easy work. When the four left for Germany, Christian Metz thought he would go back and help with the organization and the moving and getting everything ready to ship. He thought he would go back and help with that. But he got so sick on the way over on the ship, he said, I can't do it again. I can't go over there and then come back. I'm here now, I'm staying. So they all had to handle it over there. So at least he was spared that. Yeah, and then the voyage to New York was another thing. It took a long time due to lack of wind. They were in the English Channel, I think, 7 days before they even got out of there. So it was not an easy trip. Then there were huge storms. A man jumped overboard that then somebody had to come with the ship and get him and haul him back to wherever he was from. Gottlieb Agaman, Brother Metz's scribe, got really seasick and spent the entire voyage in bed. Metz himself was sick and, like I said, didn't go back over there. Things did not go smoothly, even before the great debacle of buying land in New York, which was an endless struggle. Given the huge undertaking of founding Ebenezer and then Amana, we can about imagine how difficult every day must have been for Christian Metz. His responsibilities to the members of the community must have been a very, very heavy burden. I don't think any of us can underestimate that great responsibility.